Now, what are the various causes of relative afferent pupillary defect? Optic neuritis, ischemic optic disease, any infection in the retina like CMV and herpes, and any macular degeneration, retinal detachment, any of them can lead to the development of relative afferent pupillary defect is what I want to underscore to all of you. The next important pupil which you need to remember is adistonic pupil. What is the meaning of it? Very simple. This is a lazy pupil, basically, ADI. There is a dysfunction in the constrictor muscle. So, it won't react to accommodation. But if you stimulate it with the light, it will react, but it won't react briskly. When you throw the light, it won't react briskly. It will slowly react, which is basically the adistonic pupil is what we need to fundamentally appreciate. When do you expect pupil to basically constrict, doctor? When you go into light. That's the reason there will be anisocoria, but when the person is exposed to bright light, the normal eye will be able to constrict, but the adis pupil will not be able to constrict, it will slowly constrict. Hence the anisocoria will worsen with exposure to light is equal to adistonic pupil, and the anisocoria which will worsen when the person is exposed to dark is equal to Horner's syndrome is what you have to basically remember. These two things if you can remember without confusion in the exam, then that is more than enough. So this is the typical guy. Normally he is okay, but the moment he is exposed to the light, we have thrown the light, this is a little dark, this is light, then typically one pupil, that is the side where adis pupil is there, it remain dilated, whereas the other pupil is able to briskly constrict, increasing the anisocoria, which is equivalent to adistonic pupil. Now, if you look at this person, both the pupils are showing some amount of discrepancy, but when this person came from the light into dark, then the pupil on one side became more dilated, whereas the other side pupil is unable to catch up with the dilatation, which is typical of the Horner's, is what need to be basically remembered. Now, doctor, a very common question asked in the entrance, which you have to answer without using brains. If you use brains in an exam like NEET where 240 marks, 180 minutes, your run rate must be higher. So, when the light reflex is impaired, we will always check how is the near reaction, how is the accommodation. If the near light dissociation is not there, that means near is gone, light is gone. Then you think of all these causes, third cranial palsy, iris sedation, acute glaucoma, etc. Whereas the near is retained but light is gone, makes you to think of this group of important conditions. Now, if you look at the cornea, cornea is a perfectly transparent structure, as all of you know very well. Common question in the NEET PG will be, what is the type of epithelium? What is your reflex answer, doctor, for that single liner? Non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. In the exam hall, if you think is it keratinized or not keratinized, we are already in soup. So, non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium is what you need to remember. And corneal epithelium lies flat against a substantia propria, and there are no connective tissue papillae in the structure of the cornea. Now, what is meant by Bowman's membrane, doctor? The basement membrane between the corneal epithelium and the substantia propria is thick which is basically called Bowman's capsule, Bowman's membrane. Honestly speaking, it's not a membrane, it's a condensation of the tissue, that's all. What does substantia propria basically contain? It contains collagen, fibroblasts, and the ground substance, and fibroblasts are the very common type of the cell. And since these collagenous fibers are organized in a regular parallel way of alignment, that gives the transparency to the cornea is what you have to basically appreciate. As you already discussed, cornea and the lens, they are fundamentally avascular structures. Still they require oxygen to live, they require food to live. How do they get that? Directly from the air, cornea will breathe the oxygen in, and the nutrients to the cornea will be reaching through the aqueous humor, and the corneal connective tissue is basically limited by the fibroblasts, and there is no immune system. My cornea, your cornea, president's cornea, prime minister's cornea, everybody's cornea is cornea after all. You can put anyone's cornea into anyone without any HLA matching or typing, which is the great advantage of the corneal transplant. Then you have a Descemet's membrane, which is the thick basal lamina. The Descemet's membrane, which is made up of the elastic fibers, and it basically stays above the level of the endothelium. Now the question comes, what kind of endothelium layer it is in the case of the cornea? The corneal endothelium is fundamentally a simple squamous epithelium which is present below the Descemet's membrane, is what you have to ultimately remember. Cornea has got the free nerve endings, and it is basically innervated by fifth cranial nerve, trigeminal. So there is a reason pain is felt by the cornea through the free nerve endings. The next important issue asked frequently is, what are the layers of retina? What are the layers of retina basically? We have a retinal pigment epithelium, layer of rods and cones, an outer limiting membrane, a nuclear layer, plexiform layer, inner nuclear, inner plexiform, ganglion. So you must know the garden variety of the layers, which is outermost, what is innermost, if you remember, more than enough. Everything else in the middle you can leave it to the God. Now, in this context we are going to talk about a very important structure which will decide our conjugate movement, called MLF, medial longitudinal fasciculus. What is this structure, Dr. MLF? Whenever you are asked to look towards your right, you are looking towards your right, let us say, the right eye is expected to undergo abduction, same time the left eye is expected to undergo adduction. How is it possible? The moment you plan to look towards your right, the right cranial nerve nucleus, which is sixth cranial nerve nucleus, which is abducens. Where is abducens located? Third, fourth is in midbrain. Oculomotor is in midbrain. Our medial movement of the eye is decided by midbrain. Fifth, sixth, seventh are located in pons. So our pontine nucleus, that is the sixth cranial nucleus, abducens will be thinking of moving the eye towards the lateral side. Then it will slowly whisper in the ears of the third cranial nerve nucleus on the contralateral side through this important connection which is basically called medial longitudinal fasciculus. If this medial longitudinal fasciculus is gone, let us say there is some demyelination like multiple sclerosis and it got injured or damaged, what will happen? When the lateral rectus is moving the eye laterally, the medial rectus will not be able to move the contralateral eye medially. Hence there will be a lag in the adduction. That's called adductor lag. When this eye is not moving and only that is moving, what is the immediate problem that will arise? Diplopia. And to overcome the diplopia, immediately what will our vestibular nucleus will be doing? it will set the abducting eye into nystagmus, and immediately the eye will pass point back with the fast component. So what do you have here, doctor? Whenever abduction is initiated, adduction in the contralateral eye is not initiated, and there is a lag because of the MLF lesion on the side where adductor lag is there. When adductor lag is there, there is a diplopia which will stimulate the abducting eye to once more come back, and that elicits a nystagmus in the abducting eye. So that is basically called as internuclear ophthalmoplegia, is what need to be remembered. Now comes a important challenge. Sir, the adducting eye is not adducting. That can also happen if the oculomotor nerve injury is there. Suppose if the oculomotor nerve palsy is there, even when this eye is abducting, this eye may not be able to adduct. How do you differentiate whether it is the oculomotor nerve injury or whether it is the medial longitudinal fasciculus injury? Just like if the room suddenly becomes dark, two possibilities. Either bulb is gone, like the oculomotor nerve, or main connection transformer is gone, like the MLF. How do you differentiate? It's very simple. You ask the person to look towards a closed object. When we have to look towards a closed object, what the two eyes need to do? They need to converge. If the lesion is in MLF, not in oculomotor nerve, for the convergence, MLF has nothing to do. MLF is only a broker between third and sixth cranial nerves. When the sixth moves, it tells contralateral third to move. It has nothing to do with convergence. Hence, convergence will be normal if the lesion is in MLF. But if the convergence also cannot occur, that means problem is with the oculomotor nerve, which will differentiate between the two, is what you have to ultimately remember, doctor. Let's look at some membranes in ophthalmology. The anterior limiting membrane of the cornea is Bowman, and the posterior limiting membrane is basically Descemet's. You have a pigment membrane in the retina which is called Bruch's membrane, and the optic disc, which is the point where optic nerve will land in the retina. There is one astroglial membrane covering the optic disc which is called Elsching's membrane. Now few glands you must be very sure. Sebaceous are the Zeiss glands, sweat glands are the glands of mole, and you have one main lacrimal gland and you have some accessory lacrimal glands which are called the glands of Krause and glands of Wolfram. They are the two types of the accessory lacrimal glands. Suppose if we are unable to cry after getting the results of NEET exam, we have two more small glands available to continue crying. So you have two accessory glands.